Hello, Silas here, and back with my friend Stephen. Say what's up to the peoples.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well.
And we're back for the Dishing Dish series where we talk about different foods and its sub-series of the You Are What You Consume series. And today we're talking about print. Stephen, tell us a bit about this restaurant.
Sure. So, Print is a restaurant located in Hell's Kitchen near where I live. It's on 48th Street and 11th Avenue, I want to say. It's in a building called the Inc. 48 Hotel. So it's a hotel, and then the restaurant is connected to. The restaurant is owned by different people, as far as I know. Now, the restaurant and the hotel their name because that building used to be a print shop. So Ink, of course, reference to that. Print, same thing. And it's on 48th Street, so that's where 48 comes from. There's a hotel, there's a restaurant, there's also a rooftop bar. I haven't been up to it yet, but apparently you have very good views of the Hudson River as well as the other part of the city. This is one of those restaurants. It's funny. I walked by a lot, but I never really gave much thought. Like, I looked at the menu and it looked kind of cool, but then I finally decided, why don't I go in? So I went one time with Christine. We had a really good meal. Then I went back a few times on my own, did my usual thing, take photos of all the food, write out the descriptions, did some wine pairings. And I have to say, it's another, like Dolly Varden. It's another one of these hidden gems. Like, I walked by all the time and I never gave much thought, but I'm glad I went there. And I went yesterday. I think I'm definitely going to keep going back. So very nice.
Yeah, so with this series, this is a sub-series, I said, of the You Are What We Consume, where we talk about food-related things. And just the general idea behind that is you are what you consume. So the foods, the fats, carbohydrates, proteins that build up the physical body that you are, that's part of it. Like, it literally builds up the matter that makes you who you are. And now we talk about other things about now just the food service industry, restaurants, finding different recipes from different places, how like manufacturing of food has changed over time. So we're just interested in, those are some of the topics we are both interested in. Stephen having a history of working in the service industry, both front of the house and behind the house, having actually studied at the Culinary Institute, right?
Culinary Institute of America, yes.
Okay, yeah. And myself just being a bit of you see, I'm recovering from obesity right now, and I wasn't one of the obese people just sitting there. I used to kind of joke around in that whole depressed kind of way that some obese people do, that macabre, jolly, slow suicide kind of humor that people take. Whereas, like, okay, I couldn't get this big without knowing how to cook, but it's something that I would be able to cook even if I didn't. My brother can cook. He's never been big, so it's just something. But my parents always used to. My mom always used to cook with us, and even when we were babies, when we were little kids, she'd tie us on our back and be cooking in the kitchen. But it's something that we've been doing as a family, and something that I've continued doing. So I like foods from different places, traveling around the world, seeing different things and mixing things in my own. So experimenting in different places. Definitely don't have the professional background that Stephen has, but the two of us met in New York City, and Stephen is still in New York City. And sometime back, we started this You Are Where You Consume series, and then it was maybe a few years back we finally got into the Dishing Dish series, which is a specific one where Stephen has been going out. Right now, he lives in a location where he doesn't really have access to a big kitchen. And when he was also working at restaurants, so he was eating at the restaurant he'd be working at, or going to different places on his way home, or between things like that. And it's New York City, the supposed restaurant capital of the country. So the world, actually, right? Say the world, is it the country?
So, I mean, again, I've mentioned a few times people debate this. Many say the world. Some people say it's overrated. London, Paris, Tokyo are better. It's again. And then again, that gets into what makes it the best and all that. I always think of what my one friend said about how he thought Northern California actually has more high-end restaurants, but they're very spread out. Whereas with New York, you have so much concentrated in one area. I mean, I can go a few blocks up and walk to the Time Warner building. I can go to two of the three Michelin star restaurants right there. So there's that. But I think New York also has such a level of commerce that it's able to support that. Whereas Northern California, I've mentioned before too, you go to the French Laundry, that's all there is in that town, and you got to drive miles to get to anything else.
Yeah, that is one of the things that you'll see there. Also, there's, even if it's not the top Michelin star, those kind of high ends, you would find smaller places, just some small community, might be some Java This is I would call Java. It might be like some some
Yeah.
Javan restaurant where just like it's like couple of tables, maybe 4 or 5 tabletops. It's just ran by like some family that just recently moved in like 50 years ago or something to start this place. And it's just like something where you can find different things. I know there's like random Ethiopian places, although Ethiopian is a lot more common in the United States of America, in most major cities. I think you'll find some, but you'll just find these small little places. So I think in that aspect, there definitely is a wide range of different foods and things like that you can find there. But regardless, Stephen started going to those places and taking photographs of the things, and we decided let's have a series where we talk about specifically the food, and that's what Dishing Dish is. Once we start getting into the actual food, our beautiful faces are going to go off the screen, and then there'll be pictures of the food that Stephen's taken, and we kind of just break down the how it's made, the some of the history behind the different things in them. We get ideas of thinking, okay, can we do this? Sometimes we'll just go on a random rabbit hole by something being named and going on a search and talking about that. So that's the general kind of gist with this series. And wherever you're listening to this, there will be a menu somewhere below that will go through the actual dishes. Stephen compiles a document, sends it to me, and then I just read them off, and then we kind of just go over there. So you'll be able to jump around. We normally try to keep these towards about an hour and a half per part. This will probably be at least a two-parter from what you're thinking,
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, so at least a two-parter in this one, and we have many other parts already up and ready to go. If you're done with this and you want to listen to other things, definitely check those other out. We've had at least 10 to 12 restaurants, I think, by now we've gone over so far. So with this, he's already told us a bit about the location. In the first part, when we talk about the restaurant, we like talking about some more of the background towards it. So can you tell us a bit about the tables and the ambiance inside? You already told us about the location.
Sure. So it's again, it's in the hotel. It's technically in the same building, but it's basically a separate entity. Their entrance is to the restaurant from the street as well as the hotel itself. So you don't have to stay in the hotel to eat there. I think it's very nice because the thing is, a lot of hotel restaurants I've noticed can kind of go either way. They can either be pretty solid or they can kind of be an afterthought, but this is really solid
Yeah.
on its own. Like, even if the hotel weren't there, I mean, people I think would still go to this, but they have some good collaboration with the hotel where the hotel can send people down to eat there. Maybe if someone needs a place to stay, they can recommend the hotel. There's the rooftop bar. People recommend things up there. There's also a rooftop garden where they actually grow a number of the herbs and things that are used here. So, I included in the document. Maybe we can put it on the screen. There's at least one picture of the dining room. There's one with Christine as well. So you can see the tables are wooden. There's no white tablecloths, some candles on the table, usually some herbs as well. It's a total of 80 seats. I like the way this dining room is set up because when you walk right in, there's a private dining room to your left. So if you wanted to have like a 10 or a 12 top, you could book that table. There's a bar area if you just want to sit, have a drink, maybe some small plates. There's either these banquettes here going through the restaurant, two tops. There's also a bunch of four tops. Near where I sat yesterday, there's a big table. I want to say six or you can seat 6 or 8 or something. And then in the middle of the dining room, there's actually a communal table, which of course I think it seats probably like 10 or 12. So if you want to sit and just talk with other people, you can do that as well. DB Bistro, which we talked about previously, had a communal table. Barbaloo did as well. Just, some people like that. Like if you're by yourself and you don't mind sitting next to strangers and striking up a conversation, can be fun. I've done that before. Uh,
Hmm.
print as you can as I have the website right here. It's very big on farm to table. I was going to mention this is important to me as well because I grew up gardening a lot. My parents have green thumbs, as they say, so I grew up eating a lot of vegetables that my father grew. So I thought it was cool how they talk to purveyors directly. And if you go onto the website here, they talk about there's methods of sustainability and they have a whole list of things. I'm not going to read it off here because it's on the website, but basically talking about eating things within season. There's an in-house forager who talks to the purveyors directly, so you eliminate the middleman and the retail market prices. The forager vets the purveyors, make sure they're up to standard. There's quality protocols. Rooftop garden has herbs and edible plants. There's an in-house butcher that breaks down animals. There's filtered water. They use the food refuse for compost, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very sustainable, depending what your thoughts on that are. But I think it's really cool how they find ways to make deals with local purveyors, so you eliminate the middleman, and also in a lot of these cases you buy large amounts of things so you get a better deal, which allows you to charge lower prices so you can put out nice farm to table food, charge not that much money but still get good food at an affordable price. And if you go to the team section here, they talk about the chef and the pastry chef. The chef worked in some really good places. She worked for Keller. She worked for, I want to say, Jean Georges. Where is it here? Let me see. Yeah, she worked for. Yeah, she worked for Jean Georges, Michael White, Thomas Keller. Yes, she did pastry as well as culinary arts. So she's got both of those backgrounds, which is cool because those are both very separate disciplines, as I've talked about. There's also an event planner here. She has a very good background as well. Went to NYU. They do private events as well. So if you want to book out the place for something, you can do that too. That's really nice, I think. Let's see what else here. Oh, and I would also mention that it's open for breakfast, brunch on
Okay, that's
weekends,
a good point.
and dinner, which is interesting because a lot of places it's usually just dinner, sometimes lunch and dinner. But like a lot of hotel restaurants, they're usually
Oh
open around
yeah,
the clock. They're usually open around the clock because you have people wake up, they want to get food. I mean, anyone who's stayed in a hotel, usually there's continental breakfast or something. It's just pastries or whatever. But here you could come down and get an actually a very well made breakfast. Now, I haven't eaten here for breakfast myself, but they got some interesting things. They also own a bakery called the Vesuvio Bakery. So they actually make the pastries there and they bring them in. So, and they have some very creative stuff here. They have a cacio e pepe
yeah.
scone. They have the, seasonal muffin. I think that's self-explanatory. There's small plates here. Like I see they have, there's toasted milk bread, chia pudding, there's different egg dishes and so on. Looks like a very interesting menu. I haven't eaten for breakfast. Usually I don't eat that much early in the day, but I'm sure they do a good job. I'm not sure if they've ever been open for lunch. I thought I read somewhere that they were, but I don't know that. I don't know, maybe they discontinued that or maybe the business just isn't good enough. I don't know what happened. And also on the website here, there's actually a blog section, which is very nice. And there are things here about, here's what we're doing for Thanksgiving this year. Here's what we're doing for New Year's. Here are some changes. Here's this event. This is what we're doing for this. Here's some photos of our food. Here's an interview with the chef. Very interesting stuff. There's no cookbook to my knowledge, but they're really good at presenting a lot of their ideas and explaining them. All right. Any thoughts or
Hmm.
comments?
Yeah, no, you transitioned into the parts that that's what we like going over in the first part, the
Yeah.
location, the menus and things like that.
Yeah.
We also, if there's a cookbook, we normally think about that a bit because we're eventually going to get into actually just discussing just cookbooks and stuff as part of the Your What You Consume series. I think even when we were talking about was it the Casalula one, we went a bit more into the cookbook. Was that the one where we?
We did a separate bit on the cookbook because I explained
Yeah.
the first part we did where I talked about my experience there, but then I bought the book because I was really inspired by it, and we went over some of the recipes. Not all of them. I mean, it's a fairly big book, but I thought
Yeah.
there were a few. I picked out a few highlights that really stood out to me and just went through them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking with this one, it has a breakfast and dinner. If it's a typical restaurant, you will want some time for your staff to have off. You can't just have it 24/7.
No.
Maybe if you run like a diner or something, you can do something like that if it's a more straightforward dishes. But I think with this, you can now work around, and of course, like you said, with people being there in the morning, you're going to have a lot of people. If it's in a hotel, a lot of people who are coming will be waking up. Of course, will be wanting to eat as soon as possible, and then when they come home from a long day out, so you probably have you'd probably say 25 to 45%, 25 to 50% of their daily customers are people who are living at the hotel. So if you have a time at lunch when a big majority of the people who would be coming to your restaurant are out and about at other places, makes sense to have that be the time when you're actually closed, and you can have some time when people are prepping for dinner and also prepping for breakfast the next day and things like that, right?
Yeah, I would also add that when I've eaten there, they've actually asked, "Are you staying at the hotel?" So I think they keep track of those numbers. And the other thing they do, which is nice, is they ask, "Do you have a Broadway show or something to go to?" So what a lot of these places will do is, if that's the case, they'll ask you, "Okay, when's your show by?" And they'll say, "Okay, if we recommend you order these things, or we'll
Okay,
try
that's
and
good.
speed things along." Yeah, so if you need to go within an hour, here's what we do. When I worked at Bar Balloon, remember that's across from Lincoln Center, so we dealt with that a lot because the opera is across the street. Sometimes the ballet too. So it was funny because you'd have people come in, they'd want these multi-course tasting menus and say, "I have to be out within an hour," and we just have to say, "Sorry, we can't do this." I mean, it's like it's just not practical. What a lot of these places do, and I know Barbaloo did. There was a pre-theater menu where it's a discount. You get like appetizer, entree, dessert. You order them all at once. You keep an eye on the clock, and then it's like the person ideally eats within that time frame. But because they order in advance, everything just comes out as it's ready, and then you can still get to your show on time. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's good. That's a good
Yeah.
value added thing about just knowing your location, knowing your clientele, and then thinking, yeah, this is what we need to do with who we have. Like we need to just be do that. And I wonder if you go to people. Have you been to other restaurants around Broadway? And do they do that?
What about asking if you have to be out?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, like Dolly Varden does that. I know on Restaurant Row, a lot of the people there do that. It's the same thing because they just want to make sure, okay, if you have to be out within this time, and then also if there are dishes on the menu that have a certain longer preparation time, like with Minetta Tavern, I know for the souffle, it's like Minetta is farther from Broadway, but just to lay out the example, I think it's like at least half an hour. So if you have to get out soon, they would discourage you from ordering that. I mean, you can, but it's going to be tight on time. So it's good to have that communication. And like in the case of the souffle, what they'll do is they'll say, "Oh, if you want the souffle, we recommend ordering it when you're partway through your entree. That way, by the time when you're done with your entree, it'll be ready
yeah,
because otherwise you're going to be sitting there waiting." Yeah.
yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah, it's a nice website. If you've been watching the video version, it should have been a video on the screen. Just scrolling through it, going through the menu and different things. As you can see with the menu, there was places with cocktails. We've done Dolly Varden recently. Steven's also mentioned it. That one was
Yeah.
now more of like a cocktail bar that decided to just really go into the food and some really good dishes here. Now, this one, as Stephen has mentioned, this is now like a hotel restaurant that has stepped its game up now. But now you also expect to have cocktails, beers, and wines, which is also a thing that people at a hotel would also be interested in having. And it's also a decent image of a bar. So is that the only bar at the place? Like, would people who are just coming to hang out at the bar hang out here, or do they have a separate bar in the hotel as well, like a
There's
lounge?
one, so there's that one bar in the restaurant. There's also that rooftop bar, but I don't know if that's part of the hotel. I'm not sure who owns that technically. I
Okay.
know, like I say, I think these businesses do a good job of helping each other because I think people in the hotel encourage people to eat here. And then when I ate in the restaurant, they were kind of encouraging me to go to the rooftop bar. I mean, I haven't been up there yet, but like I think they do a good job of kind of promoting each other. So
Yeah.
if you so like this is more where if I want drinks and a small plate or dinner, I would come here. But I think the other one is more if you just want to hang out on the roof on a nice day or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. And so you said you were just walking by this place and you found it. Are there any other places you've been walking by that you're thinking you might actually check out soon?
Trying to think. Because this is one of these like I go for my walks and remember I'm on 51st and this is 48th but closer to the water but I go around that
Yeah.
area a lot and I walk by so many times I was like why don't I just go in. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that really jumped out at me recently. Oh, there's a tapas place opening a block over. I'm curious. I don't know how it's going to be though because it's kind of under construction right now. But
Okay.
it's opening where there was an old pizza place. So I'm glad they're doing something with that. I'm curious how that'll be because I like Huertas a lot. As you know, we did a whole presentation on that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how this one will be. Um, Trying to think what else there is. There are a few other, since the city's been coming back, there are a few new places opening. Oh, the old Netta location, there's a new place opening up. I don't know anything about it yet, but it looked like they had a dining room set up. They had tablecloths. It looked like they were having a staff meeting. So I'm curious to see what's going to open there. I tried looking up
Okay.
information. I couldn't find anything, but just because I used to work there and also because I ate at Boo Moo, I want to come back and see what it's like now.
Yeah. And also, like you said, but Felidia is a lot further away. But that's a place that guy was trying to do like a Korean barbecue
Yeah.
place or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so those are some of the things we haven't done Netta yet. Netta is still something that eventually we'll get in the Dishing Dish series.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for now, I think we can jump into the food. We talked, you
Sure.
talked a bit about the farm to table. So with the farm to table, with that connection to the community, I'm not even going to ask. I'm just going to expect that there will be certain seasonal things, certain things that vary depending on the fresh produce, the fresh ingredients they can actually get in the community. So I'm expecting that. And the challenge level of the dishes is something that we normally think of a bit. Sometimes we'll talk about that when they're talking about the series, because that's the thing is something I've repeated over and over again. Is when I'm ordering, I like ordering things that I'm I'm not going to make on my own because they too many ingredients, takes too many steps, and just the time and the influence to do it. I'm not going to do that at home, or it's something that I make a lot, so I'm trying to figure out a new way of doing it. Those are my two primary things what I think of when I'm picking things in recipe. So with both of us cooking, having that experience, we normally kind of look and say, oh, this how hard would it be to make this, and like some of them, what was it, seasonal? When you talked about that, that was one where you're using all sorts of tools and powders and foams and things like that. Where like, okay, you need different kinds of tools, but then some of them are more just straightforward. You're like, okay, you could do this with just like a whisk and like a wooden spoon. So yeah.
And bear in mind what I probably said it a few times now, but I know Thomas Keller harps about this a lot too. Don't feel you have to recreate the whole dish. If you see one or two
Good
components
point.
that
Yeah.
you like, like if there's a certain sauce that you can figure out how to make, just serve that with something else. Like maybe you can't do the butchery work exactly, but if you can make the sauce, pair it with something else or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that is one of the things that I even from just starting to do the dishing on dish thing, it's I've just gotten more into like when I'm cooking even at home now, just adding some kind of sauces into it. Like that's just something that I think has I've upgraded my game into doing. Yeah. All
Sure.
right.
All right, ready
So
to
you
jump in.
ready to jump into the food? I think we could
Yep.
do that right now. Our beautiful faces are going to leave the screen as I mentioned, and now we're just going to go into the first dish. Here you have the little lady Christine
Mm-hmm.
and the man himself, Stephen, at the restaurant. And the first dish, he normally puts them from the lightest to the heaviest. So he starts with appetizers and aperitivo or amuse bouches if they're there. Then we go into the actual main dishes, primo piatti and we go secondo piatti, carne, that kind of thing. And then we get into the desserts. And then sometimes if there's cocktails and drinks, he'll put that as last. That's a general way we do these
Yeah.
dishing dish series.
I would point out here, I've been cutting back drinking. So 2 out of the 4 times I had wine. The other 2 times I had iced tea. So there's a few wines in here, but not as many as usual because I've been scaling back. So
Okay. So yeah, the first one we have here is a charred market beets with pine berry, smoked cashew, and lime.
So this was very interesting. I'm a big fan of beets. I don't know about you. I know I love them.
Not so much.
My father does too. I think a lot of Eastern Europeans love beets, so maybe there's something there with that. I thought this was one of the most interesting beet salads I've had in some time. I had this when I was with Christine because a lot of people just do beets with goat cheese and whatever, and sometimes some kind of nut, and it's boring. But this I thought was very creative. So you can see here there's red and golden beets. What I'm thinking they probably do is roast them and they char the outside either with a blowtorch or on a grill or something
Yeah,
just
that
to give
sounds
it that
fun.
flavor. So then you can see pine berry. I had never actually had pine berries before. They're very interesting. They look kind of like white strawberries. It was one of the. It's always cool to see something that like you don't know what it is. I mean, obviously I eat lots of different food, but I saw this. I was like, what is this? And it has kind of a pineapple-y smell. It's a little bit sour. It's white. It's white with the red instead of the red. It's like well the seeds. It's white with the red seeds, whereas usually strawberries, of course, are red with the brownish seeds. So very interesting flavor. Apparently very nutritious as well. High in vitamin A and vitamin C. I thought it was an interesting pairing with beets. Smoked cashew, that's actually what's on the bottom as well. It's self-explanatory. They smoke the cashews. My guess is they probably do like a pan smoke or something. Then some fresh cashews sprinkled around the outside, some little cilantro, and then a little bit of olive oil and lime over top. Really, really flavorful dish. I was going to tell my dad this is another dish he would like because he likes these items a lot. And like I say, just doing something more creative with beets rather than just goat cheese and the usual.
Yeah, I'm not too big a fan of beets, but my mom likes them. She prefers just like she normally just has them boiled and then she peels it first and you just boil them and then you just keep them just like that kind of solid thing and then you chop them up and put them in salads and just like more like leafy salads or just like a side kind of thing. So this might be an interesting preparation I might tell her about. She might like this, but then now you need that blowtorch type of thing. I guess it's something you can probably just tool up. You can
Well,
just use like an open flame.
you could roast them in the oven, like I say, and even put
Yeah.
them on a grill briefly. Do just to have mars because the beets are cooked all the way through. But if you hit them with flame directly, they wouldn't cook through all the way. So I'm thinking they probably roasted them, then hit them with the flame after, just to give the
Hmm.
char. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, cashews. I'm a fan of cashews. So yeah, this again now you could have very different mouthfeels working together with these things together. So the lime is just like spritzes. There's some spritz of lime on it.
Yeah, just a little bit for flavor and cilantro as well. I like cilantro a lot. It was
Yeah, me
funny.
too.
Megan's fiance made the comment to me recently. She goes, "I feel bad for the people that taste it and taste soap because she's like, it's one of my favorite herbs. I couldn't imagine
Yeah,
missing
it's
out." But
true.
it's a genetic thing. I mean, some people just taste it. It tastes like soap. I don't know what
Yeah.
version. Yeah.
It's a very, very common herb here in Kenya, in Nairobi. Like it's the most common. I think yeah, it's the most common green herb that's used in food. Like here they call it dania, and it's just like yeah, it's a regular thing that it's a staple in most dishes.
It's big in a lot of Latin American cooking too. Like if you have Mexican food, you'll probably see it several times. Yeah.
Yeah, people sometimes will confuse it with parsley, but there's a very different taste to it, and the leaf's slightly different. Like I'd say this dania has more of a, at least depending on if you have the heirloom one where it has the flowers and stuff, it has like very thin leaves. So I guess it's different strains of it, so that's kind of different. But the typical one you find will have more roundish leaves than the parsley. Parsley will have more of like a maple leafy type of thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
pointy.
big. It's pointed and bigger, and then there's also curly parsley. If you make like tabbouleh or something, that's what you would use for that. And then people also confuse chervil because chervil looks a little bit like it looks like it could be almost like the curly parsley. Like the leaves are very small and delicate and similar shape, but chervil will have that anise taste, and the leaf has a very delicate look. Like you would know chervil if you saw it over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, but yeah, cilantro we normally have. It's also now these ones like cilantro and parsley. These are now things that I suggest. Just it's just a thing. If you have a house, even if you have like a small apartment or something, just get like a small little some small little planters and just grow some. Just grow some in your home, and it doesn't take too long to actually mature. It also gives a nice aroma if you have it in the kitchen. This tiny bit of converting the carbon dioxide in your house to oxygen, but it's just something that I think is something nice to have that can just spruce up your kitchen, or you just as you're trying to expand or try to do different things with cooking. I think.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so now moving on to the next dish here. We have a chicken liver mousse with rhubarb, whole grain mustard, and a spring onion puree.
So this was actually the most interesting chicken liver preparation I've ever seen. I thought I was really impressed by this because when I first saw this on the menu, I saw a chicken liver. I thought, oh, it'll be the usual. It comes in a little jar and maybe there's like a mash of rhubarb or something on the side and maybe some toast. But if you notice from the picture here, what they actually did was they created almost a tart where they did crust on the bottom, the liver on top of that, and then they layered rhubarb. They sliced rhubarb thin and they layered it in shingles across the top. And then I'm not sure if they baked it briefly or how, because you have to cook the liver. Maybe my guess is maybe they cooked it enough so it held together and it's still a little pink on the inside. But also bear in mind liver oxidizes too. So I think the way this is prepared, it's covered on top so it'll bake, it'll be cooked all the way, but then it won't oxidize until you cut it open. But if you cut it to order, that side piece will still say pink when you serve it. Spring onion puree, that's similar, garlic, leeks, chives, that kind of family. There's a puree, whole grain mustard, and then there's a little bit of dill on top. I highly recommend this. Definitely the most interesting chicken liver mousse preparation I've seen. I mean, it looked nothing like I expected. I was really impressed they went to this trouble.
Yeah, scrolling through the picture, it's like, Stephen, you found Stephen. Stephen is human foie gras, and he's hunting down all the foie gras dishes in New York City, whenever he can find them. So this, to me, I thought this was going to be a foie gras dish, but as you said, it's a different presentation of this. Yeah, we went the rhubarb on top. Yeah, rhubarb is a tough thing. I'm still trying to eventually make some rhubarb pie, but it's a weird plant because it's like you can do these things with a kind of like you see here with doing more of an appetizer type of thing. But then rhubarb pie, I think, is the most common thing that people have with it. But it's a vegetable, yet it really works well in this pie, kind of this sweeter thing. It's a strange kind of thing in and of itself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yeah, I grew up eating rhubarb actually because we grew it in the yard, and I probably told this story before, but the soil in Dad's garden is so fertile because we dump all this compost, like vegetable matter, ash, and everything. So we had this rhubarb plant that was closer to the stream in the far back part of the yard that was dying. So my dad pulled it out. He did it it was either night or close to sunset because they say the roots shouldn't be exposed to sunlight. Yeah. But he put it in the garden, it just blew up. Like it went from this like dying plant, it had these like massive stalks, and then we just started making pie, rhubarb crumble, other things with it. For those for those who don't know, it's very sour on its own. You have to add sugar to it. It's a little tough too. You got to cook it down. The one thing with rhubarb too, though, you got to be careful. They say is one, the leaves are poisonous, but also it's one of those plants that's very hard to get rid of. So if you put it in a certain area, like it's like you better want it there. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a nice, but as Stephen mentions, that nice hardy plant. So again, that's another one if you want to think about it. And those red stalks are very appealing looking. The really broad leaves. This is going to be
yep.
an image on the screen if you've seen it. But yeah, here with the spring onion puree. Now this is our kind of thing. Like you can switch out that spring onion with a lot of other things, and that's another thing. Like we're making some mukimo here, which is this kind of or irio. It's this dish here in Kenya. It's a Kikuyu dish where they use the primary things like potatoes, pumpkin leaves, or Swiss chard, peas, and sometimes you add carrots and corn is a known thing. So it's kind of like a mashed kind of thing. But onions is normally a typical thing, the red onions or white onions. Now, we didn't have red onions or white onions. It was like, no, instead of doing that, just make the dish. And then at the end, we just added some chopped fresh spring onions into it, like the actual green leaves. Because you can, if you're in a pinch, and you don't have actual red or white onions, the tubers, and it's not like you're looking for something with a strong taste of the red onions if you're doing like kind of salad, or more like the sweeter taste or more subdued taste that you want from maybe the of the white onions if you're doing more of like maybe a burger or something, you don't want it to be too dominant, too powerful in the taste, then you can switch out. If you're doing like a stew, if you're doing something like where you're frying actual meats or you're frying some other, like some vegetable and things like that, or things like that, you can use chives or no, chives is not the chives. Yeah, chives. Spring
Well,
onions or leeks. You can use things like that because they're all in that onion family. That it still gives the same kind of taste that you can get from those.
well, I was going to add too, the other thing you can do is combine multiple onions like people do with apples. Like if you make apple pie, they say it's good to use different apple varieties because one is
Mm-hmm.
sweeter, one is more tart, one's something in between. So you have the different flavors play off each other and the flavor is a little more complex. It's a similar thing with onion. Like someone was telling me if you make French onion soup and you use Vidalias, which are sweeter, you use ones that are a bit spicier, all that. So then when you have the soup, you'll have a little bit of spice, a little bit of sweetness, a little, the flavors kind of play off each other. It's very nice.
Yeah, there's a dish we did like five onions. There's like some five onion dish. I'm forgetting what restaurant it was that we did that. I think it was a DB Bistro.
Yeah, I think Thomas Keller has like a liver and onions, but he does like 3 or 4 different onion preparations on the plate. So there's like caramelized, confit, something else. Oh, I think what else was? Oh, Casamono, they had the foie gras dish with the multiple onions preparations.
Yeah,
There's like fried, confit, caramelized, and there's like 1 or 2 others. So
yeah.
I
There's like
thought
a
that
five
I thought
different onions. Yeah.
yeah, that was really cool. I thought again, same thing, one sweet, one spicy, one's what's a good way to put it? Spicy, sweet.
Umami or
One's like
whatever.
what's it?
Umami. I don't know what's the
Yeah, but
umami word
you get the
is.
point. Different flavors, yeah.
Okay, so now moving on to the next dish here. We have some stracciatella with tarragon, pesto, rhubarb, and Harry's berries and fried ramps on top. Why do you keep ramps on top? And you pair this with some cava. So let me see. Okay, so you see with the strawberries. Yeah, it's interesting plating here. It
So
looks
I
like, yeah.
I thought a lot of you here because I know you love burrata, and this is kind of related to that. This is actually the shreds of mozzarella with served with cream. So if you like
Mhm.
burrata or mozzarella, this is probably up your alley. This was a special they were running one day, and the guy told me about it, and I thought, oh, I definitely got to try this. So the stracciatella, that's the cheese on the bottom. For those who don't know, if you make mozzarella, you have curds in hot water, and
Yeah.
you basically work it. It's a little hard to get exactly right because if you get the water too hot, the curds will seize up and then fall apart. But then if it's too water's not hot enough, that doesn't melt evenly. So you got to sort of strike that fine line. And then tarragon ramp pesto, for those who don't know, this is sort of modeled off of Genovese pesto. Genovese pesto is typically basil, pine nuts, garlic, olive oil. But in this case, what they did was instead of basil, it's tarragon. Instead of garlic, it's ramps, a little bit of olive oil. I'm not sure there are nuts in this. They didn't mention, but I didn't taste any. Um, Rhubarb, of course, that sort of is to pair with the strawberries, which comes next. The Harry's berries. This is actually the name of the farm. The guy grows organic strawberries, very sweet, very flavorful. if you buy commercially grown strawberries, a lot of them tend to be hydroponically grown. They basically taste like water. Same thing with tomatoes. But these are very sweet because I guess his soil is very well maintained. They're organic. They prune the plants so the berries grow better. Very good quality. I want to say this is in California, but I guess they have a deal with this restaurant. On top, that's actually the fried ramp root, which I thought was kind of interesting because typically we've just thrown those out anywhere I've worked. But apparently you can fry them and they still have some of the flavor. So as long as you clean them thoroughly, you can fry them. They're crunchy on top. You just serve them on top. Yeah, and then just I guess like a few dots of olive oil. That's it. Yeah, this was really well done. It was a special though, so it's not on the menu regularly. But I guess they wanted to use these items because of springtime. Yeah.
Really interesting presentation. That bread looks scrumptious too.
Yeah, and ramps, for those who don't know, they're only in season in springtime. They're often described as a cross between garlic and leeks. I've been buying some the last few weeks. Christine and I have been eating the leaves, but then the stems I've actually pickled. I'm going to give some to my father because he loves garlicky stuff, so I thought he'd like these a lot. And I probably mentioned in previous videos, but in springtime, a lot of chefs will just buy a ton of ramps. You use the leaves. You can either saute them, puree, put them raw in salad. We did that, or on sandwiches. And then the stems you usually pickle or you preserve in some way. Then you can use them the rest of the year. So they'll buy a ton of ramps, clean all of them, pickle the stems, and then like the next several months you just serve them with charcuterie or something else.
Yeah. This Harry's Berries place does seem to be in Oxford, California. It's Oxnard, CA. And yeah, it's a pretty well-known thing. You can get them delivered all over the country. They've got a website and things like that up. I was just thinking with these things, this whole thing, restaurants can have this relationship where they work with an actual place. And this is something that happened during the pestilence of kind of now accepted from lab origin type of thing that was happening with the disruptions between the farms. We find out that, there's a whole bunch of food that just goes directly to restaurants. A whole bunch of food goes directly to schooling indoctrination complexes, the cafeterias that they have there. Then like a whole different bunch of food goes to grocery stores. But because of the regulations and the way things are done, you can't just be like, now that people are ordering more from the restaurants, they need more in the delivery and the schools are closed. So we can't just like shift this and be like, okay, now people need to buy more things from the grocery stores. You have to like, certain farms have licenses to only grow things that are going to go only to the schools. So if the schools are closed, they can't ship this stuff to other places. And then you have the different regulations to enter places. Certain foods and things like that are protected to make like, you need to plant a whole bunch of this because these random like industry somewhere else needs this, so we can send this to this other country as well and things like that. And it's just mutated the whole industry where I think if you had less interference in the farming industry, we still wouldn't be back to the days where you had like 95% of the population involved in actual food growing some way. But you'd have some situation where there'd be a lot more people doing things like what our friend Mark did in our I Know Great People series, talking about his family farm, where that would be more of an actual viable thing that people like this is going to be my living by just getting 50 acres and managing that by myself and like my small family, maybe hiring one or two people from the town or the neighborhood where just people come in and out of the place, or some younger people just learning more about foods, or you do some agrotourism where you have like a little like town, like a little out, like not a little shed or something on the side where people can come and have an Airbnb and like spend the night or spend a weekend on the farm and do that, while you're also just supplying the restaurants in your area or the homes in your area, getting food directly from you and things like this. This could be it could be a whole different way that I think something like this will start coming back as some of these things, we start realizing that this centralization of all these things, some of these things just don't necessarily work. And with that, as you mentioned, you get to the situation where the food just doesn't taste as good because you need to make sure that we need to get all these bananas from this location. At one time, we're plucking them when they're not raw, when they're not ripe yet. So we spray a chemical on them so they can freeze in their actual growth aspect, and that actually kills a lot of the organic part of it. And that's the fats, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the things that make it nutrition. We freeze those things, and all of a sudden we get them to the place, and now we spray something else on them that starts activating that thing, and that's like an entirely different thing. And you actually get the foods, and the food is just bland. It doesn't really taste like these schnozberries don't taste like schnozberries, So that's something that happens, and I think you can definitely tell the big difference when you actually try to grow your own things. Yes, some of the things might suck, and you get some disease, might not be as tasty, but when you do get that tasty thing, it is a whole different level, and that's something that seeing this kind of relationship, seeing a restaurant like this is something I'm like, this is something that I think even if you just had it out there, restaurants are advertising like this is what we do versus this other restaurant gets factory type of things. I think that's a selling point, and that's something. It's not just a selling point. The food actually tastes better.
Yeah, because I mean, I like their whole philosophy of they have the forager who makes the contacts with purveyors, makes vets them, makes sure they're all good, and yeah, it's a combination of making sure the quality is there, but like they say, eliminate the middleman so you don't have to pay the retail market price. And I'm sure they have these deals where you buy things in bulk consistently. And I've mentioned in the past that's what you do with a lot of liquor orders, like, oh, you order this much sake, okay, we'll give you a discount on expensive Japanese whiskey, then you
Mm-hmm.
can charge less for it, and then people are willing to come there and spend money, and you make up money on volume. And this also goes to the whole thing which you sort of touched on with regulations, where people say, oh, without these regulations will be poisoning, and it's like, no, they have somebody in house who makes sure that these people are supplying good stuff, because if they sold them pounds of rotten ramps or something, they
Yeah.
would stop buying and those people would go out of business. Like, when I went to Minetta Tavern recently, I had soft shell crabs. Those are big in season around this time, and it was a very strange year, the guy was telling me, where there were a lot of really good crabs that came in, but there were also a lot that he had to send back because the quality just wasn't up to par. But that's how it is. You have a chef and people in house. Usually, like, I know Bar Balut had a food steward whose job is actually to do this. They make sure everything's up to par, because if not, well, then the chefs are throwing money away. They could potentially poison people. So there are mechanisms in place. Again, it's not perfect, but I mean, neither is government. I mean, things get certified by the FDA or USDA and still end up poisoning people anyway. So,
Yeah, and that's one of the differences that I would say definitely with the food here in Kenya. We don't really have as refined a cuisine and things like that, but the actual quality of the food is just it's just so the meat just tastes better than the average meat you get in America. The fruits just taste better, but yeah, sometimes like with mangoes, like if I get a mango from the store in America, I know it'll be like a certain amount of ripeness. So I know when I buy it, it'll be ready to eat that day or the day after because they only throw it out if it's not within that tiny window, and it'll have the general mango taste. But here, I'll get a mango and then I'll feel it. Sometimes it'll be like I need to wait like a week before it's ready to eat. Sometimes like half of it will be rotten, or there'll be like something has gotten into it where like I can't eat like even half the food, or I have to throw the entire food out. But those 2 out of 5 times when I do get the right mango, the taste and the flavor explosion that comes from that is kind of worth those other like too raw or like I have to throw out the bits of it. It's a give or take thing. So it's something where you take some things and you don't. And now I think one of the bigger differences in Europe, I don't really appreciate how they got along to do these protectionist zones and things like this. But some of the cuisine there, it's just the raw ingredients are just better than you'll find at certain places when you have that same food in America. So even if it's the
yeah,
same exact recipe, because the food is more, I don't want to say organic because it's all organic and it's all chemicals, it's all different things coming together, lipids and all these, whatever those scientific things are. But just the process of making the thing is just fresher. And I think it's gone through its natural process. It's not that preservatives. It's not that whole adding of these other things or freezing it in this kind of way. I personally am really, I try to avoid freezing any food. I try to like make the dishes in the size that I need to have it and then get to that point. If I'm going to freeze something, I don't like freezing it cooked. Maybe I'll like parboil or fry or something where it's like there's still a cooking process that needs to go on when I put it back. And even now when I put things in the fridge or freeze things, I like letting it come back to room temperature, and then I'll refry it or I'll cook it on the stovetop instead of like microwaving and just blasting. It's something that I've done personally myself. Maybe I'm too picky with some of these things, but I do think there's definitely a big taste difference if you heat something in the oven versus blasting it in the microwave. I know for some people, time-wise, they don't have it, or they might not have a place where they have an oven. But if you have the option and you have the time, try the actual stovetop oven type of kind of heating type of things. Yeah.
sure. Oh yeah,
So
and
tell
just
us a
to
bit about the
touch.
cava. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the Spanish sparkling wine. It's kind of their answer to champagne, you could put it that way. It comes in different varieties. There's brew, dry, there's secco, sweet, there's semi-secco, that's uh semi-dry, then there's dulce, which of course is sweet. So it's like other sparkling wines in the sense there's a range. It's not as sweet or as fruity as prosecco typically. There's typically three grapes used, or well, originally it was I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but it's Macabeo, Parayada, and Jarelo, yeah. So whoever speaks Spanish, Isolet, or whoever feel free to chime in and correct me. But now they actually also use Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which are big in Champagne. So you can see they're kind of trying to mimic that. Um, it comes in different varieties. This is a white cava; those are white grapes. But some people use the red. You can have rosé cava, or there's also red cava. If you do like with Pinot Noir, it's going to be red. Monastrell is also going to be red. Grenache and other ones. Um, this one I would say it's drier, a little bit of minerality. I think with this one I want to say there's maybe some lemon, but it's not sweet. It's more drier. Paired well with the cheese because it's kind of milder. I mean, I love pairing sparkling wines with lots of different things. Like sometimes I have champagne with my appetizers or things like that. I love sparkling wine in general, and cava is a bit cheaper than champagne too. I probably prefer it a little bit to Prosecco, honestly, just because there's a little more variety. It's a little drier and so on. Huertas, of course, I had it a bit there. So I definitely recommend Cava in general. I mean, like any wine, there are better varieties and they're better producers and all this, but I mean, I definitely recommend it in general.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say on it, on the wines and the drinks and things like this. But with wine, definitely check out the other series that we had with I Know Great People. We talked with our friend Laura about natural wines and a whole bunch of other things. And she goes more, Stephen and her go a lot more into like wines and the backgrounds and things like that. And she also has a website, is it Silken Coop now, or she changed the name? Is that the older name or is that the new name?
It's Crushable Wine Club or something.
Crushable Wine Club,
Yeah.
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 She has a thing where she does like wine adventures where you go out and she gives you different wines and you sometimes you go to wineries and it's very interesting. There's a lot of information out there on the internet if you're into these sorts of things now, and it's a rather exciting time, I think, just for information in a wide range of things. So yeah,
Right.
expand your horizons.
There you go.
Okay. So now on to the next dish here. We have some mafaldine. Mafaldine. I don't know why I'm saying it like Spanish or something. Um, is it mafaldine or mafaldine?
Malfadina, I want to say.
Mafaldine. Okay, mafaldine with cacio e pepe, pink peppercorn. Slight issue here with what we are recording with. Somehow it got divided into two pieces, but we're going to jump right back in with Stephen talking about the peppercorns.
And pink peppercorn, so it's a play on that. Horseradish on top is nice. I like fresh horseradish a lot. They grate it over top, very fresh flavor. When I worked in the Austrian places, they use it a lot. They're very big on that. And then, did you have any questions about the dish itself, or should I talk about the wine?
It's a rather straightforward dish. This is just something where you can, of course, it's just the basic things. As you see, it's some kind of pepper and then some kind of cheese. So you can switch those things around with some kind of pasta. Now, you see this wide range of pastas. We've talked about this previously. I think that we found this place with like 300 or something different kinds of pastas, but you can invent your own. It's just creating different shapes. And that was just like the Italian sort. So there's even like the ones when you go to Japan, they have their own sorts of noodles and things like that. When you go to China, they have different kind of noodles. So there might be some crossover with them and things like that. But then now this is a dish that you can make at home. We're just switching out your favorite kinds of cheeses. And if you think, okay, you can't grate the cheese, it's a softer cheese, maybe you freeze the cheese. No, I won't suggest freezing the cheese. Maybe. I don't know. Let's not freeze the cheese. But you can maybe you can just chop it up or find some different way to like put the cheese on top of it. It doesn't have to be a drier cheese. But there's just different sorts of things you can do with cacio e pepe. So it's a flexible dish, and this also again goes back to the Italian type of thing. For those of y'all that might not be familiar with Italian food the way it is, they normally do things in stages, where it's just like this by itself, then that by itself. And it's normally like a 2 or 3 ingredient type of thing per appetizer, per primo, secondi, salata, those kind of things. It's not a thing where they give you a plate with like the meat and the veg and everything together on the plate. This is kind of a more typical thing that you see in Italian cuisine.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, issues with freezing cheese. I think that would be a problem because a lot of cheeses there's protein as well as fat. Yeah. And I know freezing will impact that differently, so they might separate or something. And then if you thaw it out, it's gonna be kind of messy.
Yeah, it would not be a bad situation. So yeah, I think just if it's a softer cheese, you can just try to find a way to like chop it into tiny pieces, into small strips, and then you can just lay the strips over on the pasta, and then you put whatever kind of pepper and things that you're going to put on top. So yeah, tell us a bit about the wine.
So gruner veltliner, it's one of the Austrian wines. I think I forget if I mentioned in a previous discussion, but that whole thing about how in Europe, people tend to drink wines more by region, but here it's more about following trends. So certain wines will be trendy, and people will get bored and something else and all that. And I remember when I worked at Barbalud, Gruner Veltliner was trendy. Then, of course, when I worked in the Austrian places, they pushed this because it was just, of course, in the Austrian restaurants, it goes with their food. It's one of their national grapes. So Grün means green in German. Veltliner is the German version of Valtellina, which is a town in Alto Adige, it's currently in the north east of Italy, north slightly eastward, and that went back and forth, of course, between Austria, Italy, and all that. But I guess they both produce wine in that area. It's definitely a light body, kind of milder wine. It's one of those. I don't drink it all the time. I find it tends to be kind of mild, but at the same time, like it's easy to drink and it pairs well with a lot of things because of that. So it often has, it'll have some spicy notes, it'll have pepper notes, it'll have a little bit of vegetable aromas, usually mineral with high acidity. They've said that it actually works because it's milder. It pairs well with certain things like artichokes that have kind of distinct flavors and don't always work well with different things. I don't, like I say, I don't drink this all the time, but I saw it on the menu and I thought I'll give it a shot and see how it goes with this pasta. And yeah, it was decent. I mean, I got a different wine for the next course, but I mean, it was decent. Again, probably not my top pick, but all right.
What cheese do you use? Parmigiano?
I think so. Yeah, I didn't ask actually. I should have in retrospect, but
yeah, because that's a stronger cheese. So if you're gonna do something that goes with that's supposed to be milder, I think that'll be what to do. All right.
Yep.
Yeah. So on to the next one here. We have some squid ink campanelle with some swordfish bolognese and seasonal olives. Interesting.
Yeah. So this I thought was a very interesting dish because, just like typically for those who don't know bolognese, it's typically ground meat, ground vegetables, and you add like a touch of tomato and butter, because what a lot of people refer to as bolognese is really meat sauce, and it's not. It's not, because I remember, I was thinking of the other day, I remember when I was in one of the last classes at CIA, I got bitched out by the TA because he's like, you're not allowed to call this bolognese, this isn't true bolognese. True bolognese is, then he basically explained what I just said. So a lot of people bastardize it. And the thing is, true bolognese does have a little bit of tomato, but it's not supposed to be tomato dominant. But
I wanted ragu versus bolognese.
Yeah, exactly. So this is interesting. So campanelle actually means bellflowers. They're little bells, kind of a cone with a ruffled edge. It's I'm trying to think of which region it's from. It's from Italy. I mean, obviously from Italy. I don't know if there's a particular. Well, I don't know, but I don't know there's a particular region, because I know like lasagna is famous in Campania, which is where some of my ancestors come from. So Campania, if you picture like the foot of Italy, it's like the front part of the shin. So that's like where lasagna is from. But with this, I don't know that there's a specific region, or it's just something that kind of sprung up and spread around. I'm not sure.
It's like a little cone. Interesting shape. It's a rather interesting. Yeah, it's like what that. Little bellflowers, little bells, campanelle.
So squid ink, that's in the pasta for the color. Again, I think that's self-explanatory.
Okay, with this one, is the actual squid ink that they add like after the pasta is cooked, or is it actually in the actual dough for making the pasta itself?
You add it in the dough. You mix it in the dough. It stains the dough black, and then when you drop the pasta, it stays. Yeah. Because this ink stains everything. Like I remember being warned a while back, like if you ever get this on clothing, just throw the clothing out. Like there's no point trying to save it. But it stains the whole pasta black, and then you eat it like that. But the good thing is, because it's so strong, when it drops it into the water, the pasta stays black. It doesn't bleed out, which is nice, because a lot of other colors will bleed out as you cook them. So I thought this was very interesting. It was a little different than what I expected, because when I saw it on the menu, I thought swordfish. I thought, oh, it'd be chunks of swordfish, but they actually ground up the swordfish and they cook it. You can see it looks almost like the ground meat in a meat sauce or something. And the sauce is really nice. I mean, there's tomato. There was a touch of lemony flavor, which was really nice. Olives and fresh basil on top. I thought this was really good. I was saying this is another dish my father would like, because growing up, he made a lot of pasta with meat sauces, but he would use healthier meats like ground turkey and stuff. And I was thinking this would really be up his alley, because I mean, swordfish, it's a fattier fish, but I mean, it's the good kind of fat, and I definitely think it'd be a lot healthier for you than, say, beef. So I thought that would really be up his alley. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm wondering, probably get like this, like swordfish steaks, like get a couple of them every week, something, or you don't know.
Yeah, they probably
It's not everywhere else on the menu, is it?
no, because the other thing, like they said, if they get whole animals, like what you could do is get a whole swordfish, take the fillets, use the belly for like I don't know if you can use swordfish belly. I mean, typically you use salmon or tuna belly for tartare, but then the steaks you just grind up and then you make that sauce out of it and serve it with the pasta. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. What's the squid ink taste? Did it have that strong? We did the squid ink risotto once, and that was actually adding the squid ink into the cooking process rather than in the. Of course, you're not going to put it into little risottellas or whatever they are. They're like risottos when you cook. I guess you could probably find a way. Uh, uh, so yeah, what was the taste like on this?
Well, I mean, squid ink doesn't actually have much flavor. I mean, it's often for color. Like, I kind of had mixed feelings on it because in a way I feel like it's a little overrated, but at the same time, I mean, it looks cool on the plate, but it's like the flavor won't be radically different because of it either. It's more just to give things a black color. Like I might have mentioned it before, but I remember seeing this pasta that was cool because it actually had actually for Felidia we had the black and the white, the bianco neri pressed together, and you have one sheet of black, one sheet of white, and that looks really cool because then you get the piece that's black and white together. And I've also seen ravioli that have streaks of black running through it, so I'm not sure if they're separate pieces and they assemble them, but it's cool because you see like a white ravioli with the black running through. It's pretty interesting.
Okay. Okay, so the next dish here is some taleggio, scarpinocc, with some aged balsamic and some muscat grapes. Muscat, so is that a region? Because they have like those muscat dates as well too, don't they?
Yeah, so Muscat is it's a grape used for a dessert wine, which is also called it's the variety of the grape itself, and it's used for the dessert wine, also called Muscat. And I mean, in other countries, it has a similar name. Like there's in German, it's Muscateller, but it's the same thing basically. And it's just I'm reading here that it originated, I want to say here it's a city in Oman. Let me see if this is the right one.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's let's see, Muscat grapes. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's in
all. It's
Oman.
actually it's actually the oldest known grape variety, which is interesting, and they wonder if it's an ancestor of all these grapes that we have today. Um, it's a dessert. Typically, it's made into a dessert wine. Typically, it's commonly paired with foie gras, but I don't like to do that because that's kind of cliche at this point. So it's like it's one of those things like once in a while is nice, but like I wouldn't get it with foie gras every time. But what they did here, the guy who was serving me told me what they actually were doing. I thought this was creative. Is that they were trying to sort of recreate a cheese plate using pasta, like the flavors, because
Okay.
because typically you have cheese like Batello, my third to last job, you used to have a cheese plate and you'd have balsamic, you could dip cheese into, you'd have grapes that you could have with the cheese. So it's combining all these flavors into one pasta dish. I thought it was very creative. And taleggio, for those who don't know, it's a ripened Italian cheese. It's named after the caves of Val Taleggio. It's one of the oldest, softest cheeses in the world, produced in autumn and
Strong,
winter. Yeah, it's
strong.
acidic milk. It's a very complicated flavor. It's interesting. It's kind of funky. Some people say it's a little beefy. There's a little bit of like fruity tang. It's a very distinct flavor, but I thought it was very interesting with this pasta. So the scarpinocc actually means shoe. It's from from Lombardia in northern Italy, and originally the pasta looked kind of like wooden shoes. That's where the name comes from. And then taleggio, of course, is in the north, and then you have the taleggio. It's melted, a little bit of grated over the top. Muscat, so you have the sweet grapes. They taste sweeter than like the regular green grapes just because it's a dessert wine grape usually, so more sugar, and then just some balsamic drizzled over top. So you have a little bit of the funkiness, the sweetness from the grape, sweetness from the balsamic, but also a little bit of acidity from the balsamic. And yeah, it was a very interesting. Out of the three I tried, this was definitely my favorite pasta here. There was one other pasta. There's typically four on the menu. There was one I want to say with tomatoes and andouille sausage, which we talked about, but that didn't excite me as much. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll try it in the future, but this was what I had the first time I went, and this was definitely my favorite out of the three. Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like an interesting kind of thing. And these scarpinoccs. You said they're filled. They look like little ravioli type of weird things. Not weird, but they look like there's some filling inside, right?
Yeah, because again, it means it's sort of like how you know, I always think of the Dutch having their wooden shoes. I guess it's kind of like a play on that, but it's like the pastas have that distinct shape. So then there's the cheese inside as well as over top, and then you have the other
Hmm.
items. So it's the cheese plate components. But I really thought this was cool because the flavors were unique, but they work very well together. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Contact figure, yeah. Because the vinegarness of the balsamic, then the sweetness of the grapes. And you also have the whole aspect where like vinegar comes from grapes from that wine kind of process. You know, the
Yeah.
strong taste of that, and of course just the more flatter taste of the pasta. Yeah, this looks good. Looks really good. There's some more like grated stuff. They also grate something on top of it because the taleggio itself is normally a softer cheese. It looked like there's some other
Yeah.
extra stuff
It's
on it.
it's probably Parmigiano Reggiano or Grano Padano or something. It didn't have a
Hmm.
terribly distinct flavor, so it's probably just give a little more flavor, but also the texture is a little bit different because this is the soft cheese melted and there's like a drier cheese on top. Uh,
Okay. Yeah, it looks good. It looks like something I would enjoy. Definitely something I'd want to order if I went there. Behind the list, and yeah, I think we can just jump on to the next one. I don't really have much else to say. It's just I'm a fan of cheese. I'm not really a fan of stinky cheese, but taleggio I think is like as far as I'll go on the stinky cheeses and still be pleased with having it. So that's one of the things that, at least from my experience, it's something. It's not, definitely not like at the gorgonzola level. And of course, some of the blues are very strong, and I don't mind those. But when it comes to just the sticky, the slimy, yeah, because I think gorgonzola gets slimy. This one is still very soft, but it's not into like slimy zone yet. So it's
no.
kind of I think okay for me.
It's
Yeah,
also a different process because I mean you figure with the gorgonzola it's the bacteria which makes blue cheese, so that's going to have a different
yeah,
effect versus this is aged in a cave and
yeah. All right. So here we go with now the Long Island duck breast with lemongrass jus and Tokyo turnips. Now this is more of the typical type of serving of duck breast that we normally see. We've seen some recently saw some different kind of takes on it. This is going back to the traditional typical type of cuts.
Sure. So this is the entree I had the first time. I mean, anyone who's listened to this series or follows my page know I love duck. I eat it all the time. I actually put this dish first in entrees. This was actually my least favorite one. Like it wasn't bad, but it was just kind of I don't know. It was just kind of I guess the other stuff was so creative by comparison. This was kind of like like it wasn't bad. I mean, but it's like is it something I would go back and get again? Probably not. So, you know, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the duck was cooked well. You can see the skin is crispy.
Yeah.
It's evenly, but well, I guess what
This
it
seems a
is,
bit too much of a gourmand. We've gotten into our ears too much. We're like, this duck breast cooked excellently. But I agree with you. I mean, it's a straightforward dish.
yeah.
It's not going to lose your position on your restaurant, but it's also not going to put you on the map. But continue, yeah.
Well, you know what I was actually thinking, like, I guess a good analogy for this. Did you ever see the Godfather movies?
Yeah.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that regarding the third one, I've noticed that there's two general stances on it. Some people think it's like the worst movie ever. Other people say, oh, it's not a terrible movie. It's just everything that preceded it was so much better that it feels like such a letdown. I'm more in that camp personally, but that's kind of how I felt with this entree compared to the others. Like, it's not bad, but because everything else was so interesting, this is just kind of like, I don't know. It's almost like it was an afterthought. I mean, like, I like lemongrass, I like duck, but I don't know. It just seemed lacking compared to what else they did. Yeah.
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 And tell us about the bit about the Tokyo turnip because like I'm a big fan of manga and anime, and I was a lot of manga and anime. They food is a regular thing in there, and these Tokyo turnips are a typical type of thing that people give. Like turnips is one of those common foods in Japanese culture.
So it's actually a cousin of broccoli and kale, which is kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Because typically you think turnips, it's usually they're bigger and there's usually white and purple on top. But if you notice, these are smaller, these are white. Some people even mistake them for radishes, but they have a milder flavor. That's actually that bit on top is actually the leaves. It looks almost like broccoli, like a broccolini or something. You can tell by the shape of the leaf. So use the whole plant. But you figure the turnips are probably my guess is they're probably blanched and then picked up in butter or roasted or something. And then with this, it's just saute the leaves. And then the jus, I think, pretty self-explanatory. Duck jus, reduction, some lemongrass to finish. I didn't taste a lot of lemongrass. I guess it's very subtle, but I don't know.
But broccoli normally grows on like a stalk, and then it's like this little crown type of thing that comes up on top. This is more
Yeah.
like a root type of tuber. So how is this
It,
related to broccoli?
it it's a root, but then the top part is almost more like broccoli. Like you
Would
notice,
it
like the
actually
kind.
grow into a stalk if they let it grow long enough? Because like the broccoli stalks like get tall, like they can keep going, going, going.
I don't know how far they go. I think these probably get picked earlier, just because it's like you're not gonna. I mean, you're mostly harvesting them for the root, and once the roots are the
Hmm.
right size, there's not much point in waiting.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know.
Oh,
I don't think I haven't used these a whole lot, but I mean, it's
but the taste is
something a
just
little.
pretty. It's it's like a cabbagey, oniony potato or something. Like what's the actual taste like?
I mean, it tasted like other turnips I had. Like there's that slight bitterness, kind of like radish, but a bit milder. Like
Okay.
radishes tend to be spicy. There's like a little bit of that, but it's way more subtle. So this is something you'd cook and serve with an entree. Whereas with radish, you'd slice them, but then distribute it through a salad, so it's not too strong.
Were these like steamed or were they boiled or what was the
Well,
preparation for them?
that's what I was saying. I think they were probably blanched, maybe picked up like in a pan briefly or something. You notice there's a very faint color, so maybe
Hmm.
maybe blanched in like a quick saute with oil or something, but not to like brown them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they have that light color to them. Okay, I think we can move on to the next one. Might probably be the last dish that we do in this
Yeah.
part of it. And here we have some. I think people sleep on pork. Yeah, bacon's amazing, I know, but pork itself is also it's a good meat that I think that people sneak on. I think wasn't that the whole like advertising campaign, like the other white meat or something for some time in the United States of America? But anyway, so this is a duroc pork collar with banana, parsnip, and pipara peppers. Pipara peppers.
So this was very interesting. I actually think the collar is an underrated item. If you ever have fish like hamachi or kanpachi, hamachi is also known as yellowtail, kanpachi is amberjack. You can actually, what they would do at Neta and other places, they break down the fish and then the collar you can actually take off and you can grill it separately. And it has a distinct flavor because you figure around the bone there's a lot of cartilage and things and that
Yeah.
impacts the flavor and all that. So what they did here was it was seemingly the pork collar, but all the bones were taken out. So my guess is they probably cook it, and it looks like it's grilled, and then they cut the meat off the bones and lay it out on a plate. So the banana and parsnip are actually in that puree, so you get sort of that root vegetable taste from parsnips. They're also called albino carrots for some people, but you get the banana in there as well. Micro cilantro on top, and then pipara peppers are actually from the Basque region of Spain. For those who watch the Huertas presentation, that's where a lot of that food is from, the Basque region of Spain in the north, sort of bordering France. So it's a long, thinner pepper. I mean, some people compare it to green beans. It's not that thin, but it's kind of that similar shape, like long and thin. These are pickled and sliced. This was really good. I thought. I mean, I think it's cool that they used bananas in an entree, and I think it worked really well with what they were trying to do here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, bananas are very, especially when you fry them, when you like pan fry them or oven roast them, they caramelize, and it's a really good taste of bananas. Like some people have had maybe the plantains is something more common like to cook in this way, but even just actual bananas it's almost like it's like just like a sweet. I'd say there's all these like processed things that people have like candies and things like that, but just like slice up some bananas, roast them or fry them, and that's enough of a candy or of a thing that you'd have. It's as good as any candy you can get out there, and definitely in general healthier than most candies. Yeah.
Did you ever work with the peels at all? You can actually eat the peels at Patello. There was actually banana peel ice cream, and I was impressed at how much flavor the peels actually have in them. But you got to cook the hell out of them because I mean,
Mhm.
everyone knows how tough a banana peel is. So what the guy would do is he would basically braise the hell out of them. They would break down completely, and then you would puree that with milk and stuff. It was really, really good, really flavorful ice cream. But there's a bit more work because with the inside of the banana, you just blend it together. This you have to actually cook like really thoroughly.
Yeah. No, personally, never gone into that.
I thought
But
it was creative.
sometimes there's some
Yeah.
things like my mom does the same when she like burns like the banana peel sometimes or like the shells of the pea pod of the bean pods and makes this ash that's like used in
Oh
some
yeah.
certain dishes. It's I don't know how that works. It's like ash. I'm like this ash. I just burned some sticks, but some reasons it's like those things have some ash that's edible somehow. I don't
Well, one
know.
of the dishes we discussed previously had scallion ash or something on it. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is some weird things, some elements and some things that are just this is part of why we do this. That's part of why we were interested in doing the "You Are What You Consume" series, because it's just like things about food, like how do you discover this is edible versus that's edible, or like, oh, there's really cool history behind how they actually make this or found this. So there's just things we're interested in that, and that's part of this series. And as we mentioned, that's the end of this first part of print.
Yeah.
So enjoyed it so far, and we're about halfway through the document. I think we're able to jump through the rest by the next part because we won't have
Yeah.
the intro as we normally do on the first parts of these series. But
Yeah.
yeah, anything else you want to say about the dishes that we've talked about?
Not really. I mean, again, I tried 3 of the pastas. I didn't try the other one. It didn't excite me as much. I may in the future. There's a whole bunch of small plates you can share for the table too. Like they have a cheese plate, a charcuterie board. They have rolls which they make in house. If you go on their Instagram, it's really cool. They actually make them in a cast iron pan together, and you pull them apart. It's pretty cool.
Actually, just did that the other day. I think I'll put a picture of that up. Just some dinner rolls in the cast iron. Yeah.
Yeah, they have some soups or some salads. I mean, I'll definitely go back and try the other stuff too. I mean, I figured do what I had just for the sake of this presentation. Maybe like with Minetta or something, we can do a part 2 where I go through other dishes again. Again, it changes seasonally. Sometimes they have specials. I mean, the only day there were specials was the day I had the stracciatella. I always ask, but I guess lately they haven't had that. I would like to come in at some point for breakfast. They have donuts, which I guess they make at their bakery. They look really good. Some of the other stuff. Again, I mean, I don't eat as much early in the day, but I don't know, maybe if I happen to get up early one day or something. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to keep coming back here. I mean, again, it's a little, I wouldn't say it's expensive, but I mean, I've been trying to eat out less, save money. So I've been eating more at home. Christine and I have been cooking a little bit together, but I mean, once in a while, I'll definitely go back and again, cutting back drinking. So it's like, sometimes I'll try a few more wines, but other days, like I'll just have iced tea or something, but
Yeah.
definitely highly recommend. And, if you're in the area or, you're in the city at all, I definitely recommend giving this place a shot. Yeah.
And there's also this thing at we talked about this when we did one if by land, two if by sea was like a high level American cuisine restaurant, and we've been wondering this series like what is American cuisine, and is there really such a thing, or is it like hamburgers and hot dogs or something typical like that? But yeah, I like that some restaurants it's like, yeah, we're going to take some Italian stuff here. We're going to take it. We don't have to advertise ourselves as an Italian food restaurant. Even though they've had a lot of pastas, they've had a lot, but it's just food. It's just good food. Yes, I understand there's still some position for this is coming from this area and this region, but even if you go to those places, it's very hard to find a place where it's not at all inspired, not at all borrowing from somewhere else. And it's part of the human condition that we have, this sharing this information and sharing the cuisine, sharing the art of culinary arts and things like that. It's a great thing because you don't have to have the person who invented it. Only their family can make it. Anybody can learn how to make these dishes. Y'all can learn. You can go to these places, check them out. Go online and just go to websites or places that you haven't been to, see what's on the menu, see if you can get some ideas of that, and you can get excited by some of these things.
Well, I was discussing this with Abraham and his brother recently, and it's sort of like this relates to a conversation you and I had off camera about ideological purity versus pragmatism. It's a similar thing with food where it's like you don't want to box yourself in so much you can't do anything because then it becomes boring. But at the same time, if you're selling it as authentic from wherever food, you kind of have to. But then it comes down to what are you doing? So I think that's why a lot of these restaurants sell themselves as new American, because then it's okay, you can draw from all these influence, but it makes sense because you can draw from different influences, but also use local purveyors. But it's not you're doing Northern Italian food. Oh, this is a Southern Italian dish. Why is this on the menu? Because then someone's going to come in and say that, but you're not selling it as authentically that thing. Yeah.
And that works because that's what America is. America is made from people from different places sharing different ideas. Because when you look at this, when you did you Are What You Consume series, we talked about how does something come from somebody's mom invented this dish in their kitchen to become a national staple. And that mom who's making some dish that might be like makes this like a matriciana or something might not be like, oh, that's an Italian dish. How dare you have this in a new American restaurant? It's like, well, the mom who initially invented it, she might have come from like Gaul in France, and she might have been living in Italy, in Roman area for maybe just one generation. She could be the first generation or a second generation person. So if you say her being a second generation Italian means a matriciana is an Italian dish, then you have somebody who moved from like Sicily like 5 generations ago has been living in America that whole time, and then now their recipe is part of a new American restaurant. How do you say that's still a Sicilian dish when that person has been in America longer than the dishes that you're saying are from there? And then that goes also to like other politics. Someone's like, "Oh, I'm from this place." I'm like, "Yeah, you're saying you're Greek American because your great great grandparents came here from Greece, but your great great grandparents in Greece came there from the UK. So are you really like, are you were they like British Greeks back then? So you're not, so instead of being a Greek American, you're a British Greek American. Some of these things, when it comes down to it, we're Earthlings eating Earth food, eating Earth proteins, fats, and carbohydrates mixed together in delectable ways, and sharing them. Thanks to Stephen for going out to these restaurants and coming out and showing us. So where are you going to go eat today? Are you cooking at home? Are you going with Christine's, or what's happening?
I mean, we'll probably just go out somewhere local. Not sure. I actually wanted to take her to Minetta at some point because she loves risotto and lobster, and they have lobster
Okay.
risotto on the menu now. So I want to, try that. Debating though. I mean, we may walk around. It's actually the weather's nice finally. The last like 5 or 6 times she came here, it rained, and now it's finally nice again. So I actually
Yeah.
walk out and do. And yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see. Yeah.
All right. So I think that's it for us today, guys, gals, and everybody else in between. Thank you all for listening. It's going to be links somewhere here below to find other content that we have. You can find Stephen's Instagram, a lot of food pictures there, some other content. It's not necessarily food, but food for your mind and food for your social political body and things like that, for your body politic. And then also chefitup.carbon33.com with different kind of food things posted over there. You can find some dishes that I made. Eventually get Stephen to start posting more things in there. Try to figure out a way to get other people to post things in there as well. And Stephen's actually cooking more. Christine's posted some pictures of Stephen cooking. So that's stuff that's coming soon. Little just of us trying our own little dishes and doing maybe small tutorials, just showing what we're doing in our own homes, in our own capacity. Yeah. So that's it for us. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you.